You can be radical in any aspect of your life, not just religion. There are obviously religious extremists across all religions in the world. There are political extremists, there are issue-specific extremists. So extremism is a broad word, and it's often misused, and particularly in this case, the radicalism, the recruitment of our young people in our communities across the country, not just the Somali American community, but here in Minneapolis, obviously, we're talking about the Somali community in the case of Operation Rhino, is to do what we're doing here tonight, and that's talk, establish dialogue, and share with each other.
Bob and EK, my name's Todd Jones. I'm the United States Attorney here in the District of Minnesota, and I've been very involved with this issue from two standpoints, well really three standpoints. First, in my role as the chief prosecutor here at the federal level, and some very let's just say being involved in the prosecution of some of the cases in Operation Rhino, some of the things that EK had talked about. You know, the other role really is a member of the community to make sure that the young people in the audience have an awareness of things to watch out for. As a father, and believe I had 5 teenagers in the house at one time, which I would not wish on anyone, because when you're going through that phase in life, things can be very confusing. And one of the things on this issue of radicalization that I think really is something I hope we can have a discussion about later is the peer-to-peer mentoring that goes on, because I found in my personal experience that at a certain point parents or a parent kind of loses control of being the most important person in a young person's life, and it becomes your friends that are around you that have a really strong influence on your decision making. And so I've seen it with my kids where, you know, no matter how you taught them as they were growing up when they were little and things that they may know, when you get into the teenage years, you're going through a very difficult time. And as EK talked about, you're vulnerable to a lot of different dynamics. And I think that that's where this radicalization issue, which is a very tricky topic because it's at the convergence of some things that we hold very dear here in the United States in terms of fundamental rights. It's freedom of speech and freedom of religion and politics, and then you throw in a community that is new to this country and just learning some of those things, and then you compound that with a demographic or an age group of young people who are just trying to figure out who they are and what their role is in the world. It's a very volatile time, which is why when you start talking about the radicalization issue, it's very tricky, because for me, for Bob, where he's at, EK, you know, our overriding concern, beside being members of the community and having care and concern for our community and our democracy, really is public safety. I mean, that's at the root of what we do, is to make sure that the community is safe. And trying to balance all of that with those dynamics we talked about makes it very, very difficult waters to navigate. One of the ways that we try and do it is through educational forms. We don't operate in a vacuum, and like EK says, there are certain things that we're just not in a position to talk about publicly for a lot of different reasons. But one thing that we've tried real hard to do through some of the efforts in forums like this is to educate, and also to hear of concerns so we can educate ourselves, not just to explain to people, here's the parameters of the law, but for us to understand some of the dynamics and struggles and better understand the communities that we serve, so that we can do a better job in communicating and having an appropriate level of transparency, because that's really at the heart of our democracy. The ability to exercise your freedoms, speak your mind, and engage in politics. And where it becomes problematic for us in this extremist environment is when people sort of start to creep into that realm of doing things that break the law, not necessarily talking about things. And it's a challenge. You know, this is a discussion, not a lecture, so why don't we take some questions?
Sergeant with St. Paul Police Department, part of the ACOP detail over there. Real quick, there's not a whole lot I can say that these gentlemen to my left haven't already said, but you got to remember that there's good and bad of radicalization. If you look at the civil rights movement, that was brought upon by radicals, and that's actually a good thing. A lot of the rights that we enjoy today, the American Revolution is considered radicalization. So the radicalization isn't all necessarily bad, but as stated, you can take it to the very extreme. And that's what we're dealing with today, is most of the extreme radicalization. But as I stated, the AIMCOP program was brought upon to learn about your culture and for us to get to know you and for you to get to know us. And we've been going on almost 2 years now, and it's been going pretty good. A lot of you, I know MGA is around here someplace, was at our youth summit in June, and I think that we had a lot of good dialogue then, and we hope to continue that through processes like this. So I guess we can open up for questions or.
Yeah.
All right, you got a mic right there.
Yeah. She has a question.
I actually have two questions, and my first one is, what do you believe leads young men to join radical reform groups like Al-Qaeda and stuff?
Is this question specifically for somebody?
Anyone who wants to answer it.
Okay.
Well, I think that there are a number of reasons, and some of the things that you've seen and heard about in the news kind of illustrate that. I know, and it was mentioned earlier here, that one of the early motivations for young men here to be involved in traveling to Somalia was the Ethiopian invasion of Somalia. The politics of it aside, it was sort of initially a spirit of nationalism to go to the homeland, even though some of the people that traveled had never been there before. They're still within the community. They could see what the reaction was. And so, the initial reason for traveling there might have been motivated less by religious reasons or religious beliefs and more by a feeling of nationalism with respect to what was happening in Somalia, which, from a political standpoint, and particularly what's going on now with the famine, it's a tragedy. It really is that Somalia hasn't had stable government for 20 years now, and that's a serious problem. So, in the context of the Horn of Africa, there are some reasons. One of those reasons is some misguided belief that you could go back and make a stateless state a better place. With respect to other parts of the world, there's all kinds of dynamics that are sometimes very personal to, the makeup and personal experiences. Sometimes it's a belief in some interpretation of Islam that people do truly believe is a correct interpretation of Islam that may not jive with other beliefs. And this is where it gets particularly difficult for the government, even in the context of public safety, to kind of do a lot, because it's running right up against one of our fundamental beliefs in freedom of religion that makes it real difficult. And there's also the dynamic of many Americans here not having as solid an understanding as to what Islam is and what Islam isn't as compared to other Judeo-Christian religious beliefs. So there's lots of different dynamics behind it, but personally at its core, I think that, whether it's radicalism with some religious hook or nationalistic hook, or it's, young people deciding that they're going to be involved in more traditional gang activity, there's still a search for something to fill a void, a search for answers on things that sometimes these other opportunities fill that void, and it leads to some bad consequences.
And then going off of that, what do you believe and how young do you believe we should educate our children about radicalization, and how and where should we educate them? Should we educate them at school, at home? Where is the best place to educate them about this situation?
All of the above. But I think with this phenomenon, looking at this audience, sometimes, as I mentioned before, peer mentoring is probably as effective as anything else. I mean, you know, it's as easy as making good choices. It's as easy as having some awareness, because, you know, there is this phenomenon that I think maybe we'll talk about later, is the social networking and the internet, and the ability now for people to communicate with peers from around the world instantly, which is something that is new. It's technology injected, whether it's, you know, Twitter or Facebook or any of the social networking medium where people, and I see some folks working their phones right now. I mean, they're probably texting their friends and talking about how this old man who's dressed like a flag is talking all kinds of craziness. But, you know, but peer mentoring. That's the thing that I hope that it's one thing to talk about parents and their kids communicating and parents knowing where they're at, but, you know, for young people going through the things that they're going through, just from my observation, personal and otherwise, your peers. It's as simple as like what I would tell my sons and daughters when they were, you know, hang out with good people. That person's not a positive influence for you. Don't hang out with them. And, you know, sometimes that blows up in your face, because then the curiosity factor goes and they end up hanging out with them anyway, just because their parents said don't hang out with them. But I mean, that kind of peer dynamic is a very powerful influence on people, on young people these days.
One of the things I want to say, not to you, just Todd Jones, but is everybody in this room, is that what makes it so difficult for the younger kids, the youth specifically, to speak their mind about issues like this is because of the image that has gone out all over the world. You know, first thing that comes to mind when you first think about Somalia is, there's a war going over there, tribal war. Second thing you think about is Somali pirates. Third thing you think about is Al-Shabaab. Then you think about youth violence over here, you know? And then now the famine is happening. So the thing is, it's really hard for, you know, the younger kids to, you know, speak out about these kind of issues. And I feel like, you know, there's a lot of positive things that we can focus on instead of going and taking this route. And specifically, I think, you know, we've been seeing this. This is one of the reasons why Kudruk started, is because of, you know, all this violence that's been happening, and all of a sudden this radicalization thing that just came up now. And I feel like I keep saying, we need role models. You guys are our role models, you know. You guys are the future. You guys are the truth. And I know you guys will be able to make a difference in the future. So stay educated and go to school and, you know, stay away from the wrong path. And this advice is to me, myself as well, not just everybody around me. My question to everybody in here, maybe a younger person can answer this, is what makes it so hard for people in the Muslim community, and I can answer this for myself, but I want to see somebody else's answer so I can copy, you know. I'm joking. But what makes it so hard to kind of talk about this topic? Because as you can see, you know, around the room, we're expecting a lot of people today, and I feel like, you know, and this message has been around all over the world. Like, a lot of people say, oh, you know, this is what's going on in the Muslim community. How come somebody doesn't step up and talk about this issue and say that this is not the right path for us. This is not what we want to take. This is not where we want our younger kids to go. You know, we have to steer them in the right path. Why is it so hard for our community to talk about this? Can somebody answer that question for me? Anybody can raise their hand. I can't see. I wear glasses. She got the mic. All right, cool.
Well, I think personally what makes it really hard to talk about it is, one, there's denial within the older generation in the community because they seem to know a purer version, more peaceful version of the religion. So to them it's like, no, there's no such thing as terrorism and all of this because that, it's not what we preach. And with the younger one, within our, I guess, my group at least of friends, and the reason why we don't talk about it much is because we feel like it's a very touchy subject. Like, you don't know how the other person feels about it. You know your perspective. My perspective would be that my religion is peaceful religion. I really don't see all these radicals and all these people, and if there are radicals, it's more of a political, more of a national thing rather than a religious thing. So it's like there's no reason to bring the religion into it. So I don't know. For me, in terms of the reason why me and my friends and people around, we don't talk about it is because I feel like religion has nothing to do with it. And if they wanted to talk about it more in political terms, we would. Because you get to offend people when it gets to religion. So.
Can I follow up?